Kia ora and welcome everyone to today's online event brought to you by Fronde and Google. I'm Jason Dallimore, the CEO of Fronde, and I'm going to give you a quick run through of the agenda, the event features, and then we will kick off into it. So first up, we have our panel and then live Q&A. So drop your questions in the comments area and we will pose as many as we can to our panelists. Once we've wrapped up the main stage, you can choose to join one of our 3 breakout sessions. So they are, firstly, does your security strategy support innovation in a hybrid working world? Secondly, creating innovation using data. And then thirdly, managing the culture shift to innovation. The platform will stay open for an extra half an hour at the end of the breakouts for online networking. And you can choose to check out the mini expo where you can have a look at Google Chrome OS, Google Workspace, and some Fronde virtual booths if you'd like to delve into a bit more detail. So as a summary of the main things that you will see on the screen in front of you are the main stage, which is what we're in now, the breakout rooms where the round tables will take place, the networking area, and the expo. Now, within the expo area, you will also be able to interact with the Exec Leaders Network help desk. So if you do get a bit lost or need a bit of help, the team are there to help you with any Q&A. In terms of communicating, as we work through today's session, on the right-hand side, you will see the chat tab, so you can jump in there and chat instantly with everyone in the forum. And just make sure you make a note that you're in the main stage or the breakout chat rooms. And next to chat, you will see the Q&A tab, and that's the tab to pose any questions for the panelists as we work through, and your ability to vote and upvote questions in there, and we'll pay attention to the more popular questions as they come up. So now, as a bit of background, Fronde has been a premier partner with Google for 10 plus years in delivering modern connected workplace solutions across both Australia and New Zealand, and we help businesses transform using global technology tools such as Google. Now, we know it's easy to fall in love with the technology, but experience has definitely told us that it's culture, change management, and people that make all the difference. And to help you learn from this experience, we've pulled together a great lineup of panelists today that have got direct experience in helping create these internal cultures that foster innovation and collaboration and really help businesses transform in a real and meaningful way. So firstly, though, I'd like to introduce Korrin Balmain. Korrin is Fronde's Google practice lead, very experienced in all things around change management and making these projects really work. Korrin's going to lead us through the panel discussion, and I will let her introduce our wonderful panelists. So Korrin, over to you.
Jason. Welcome everyone. Really excited to be here and be able to run an event like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to each of our panelists and ask our panelists to introduce themselves. And then what we'll do is we'll go through the themes that we're going to cover today, and then also go into the questions or the Q&A. So Rohan, would you like to kick us off as the first of our panelists?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, Jason and Korrin and everyone else. My name is Rohan Khanna. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Probe Group, or Probe CX. I've been in BPOs for the last 18 years, running lots of large-scale transformation programs with lots of large-scale customers, and yeah, very excited to be here.
Excellent. Thanks, Rohan. And Harvey from Atlassian, would you like to join us and introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Korrin, and thanks very much for having me. I'm the Global Collaboration Lead at Atlassian. I've been with Atlassian for about 6 years, and my focus is all about our internal collaboration strategy, the tools we use, the way we fit out our offices, and obviously going forward, how we work in a post-pandemic environment.
Excellent. Thank you, Harvey. And Natalie from Google Cloud.
Hi there. Yep, my name is Natalie. I am part of our APAC Strategic Cloud Advisory team. So we act as a field CTO team. And I've been at Google Cloud for close to 8 years now. And I've helped technology leaders and organizations across both Europe and APAC build, grow, and scale with Google Cloud technology, both as a cloud architect on the engineering side, and most recently in Europe, setting up our new transformation practice, more on the people and process side. So I'm very excited to be part of this conversation. Thanks for having me. I think it's a really exciting time to be exploring this topic.
Excellent. Thanks, Natalie, and lovely to see you again. And let's bring on Matt from Herron Todd White.
Thanks, Korrin, and thank you for having me, Jason and Fronde. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name's Matt Cantarella. I'm Director of Information Security and IT Operations for Herron Todd White. Herron Todd White, for those that might not know, an Australian-based property valuation firm. So essentially, we value properties across residential, commercial, and the agricultural sectors. And we have staff pretty much anywhere there's property in the country. So from a technology standpoint, that's always a challenge and something I'm happy to talk about today. So thanks, guys.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. And finally, Chris Balogi, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Korrin. It's wonderful to be here. Great to be with everybody this morning. I'm Chris Balogi, Head of ICT of Business Transformation at Southern Cross Care. We're an aged care provider operating in the Northern Territory, South Australia and Victoria in services as residential and community care. I joined the business a couple of years ago now, and we're on a significant journey of transformations that I started last year. An exciting time and an exciting industry at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you all very much, and welcome to all of our panelists. So the 4 themes that we're going to cover today are going to be the CEO innovation agenda, how digital maturity fosters innovation, just a bit more understanding around the link between collaboration, productivity, and innovation, and then, of course, managing that culture shift. Now, if we can get these things right, we know that it can mean significant cost savings, higher productivity, increased collaboration, and of course, innovation. So today's session is designed to explore how organizations have pivoted, especially during COVID. And that's really to help to foster innovation within the workplace. Many executives have taken COVID-19 as an opportunity to rethink their businesses from the ground up. Organizations are now seeing innovation outcomes to be accomplished in just weeks that previously took months, even longer, and they're constantly looking for ways to adopt new ways of working. And there's more self-disrupting taking place within organizations now more than ever before. And there's this shift from traditional innovation, which involves building new and sometimes digital capabilities. So this question is for everyone on the panel, and we'll start with Rohan. How has this been seen within your organization?
Should unmute. I think it's a great question. COVID actually came with a whole lot of surprises for everyone, didn't it? And I think you found yourself in one or two places. You were either in the land of regret and reflection, or you were in the land of validation, where you were looking at all the work that had happened over the last few years and thinking, well, we've done a good job. So we were really lucky. I think we found ourselves validating a lot of the work that had already occurred over the last few years. We've been through various mergers and acquisitions, so that forced a lot of change through the organization for us as well. And when COVID hit, we were transferring and making sure 14,000 people across 4 different countries could work effectively. That was done in less than 6 weeks. And then we found ourselves helping other organizations, and we onboarded 2,000 extra staff over the next 6 weeks to help organizations that weren't able to make that change. So I think it's really, for us, it was really around, I think, reflecting and validating, and gave us a little bit more, I think, permission to be more courageous around some of the changes that we've already made in the past.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Rohan. And it's certainly no mean feat bringing on extra people during that time. Harvey, what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's been obviously a major adjustment for everybody. Similar to Rohan, we were lucky that we had taken some steps in the right direction in advance. Probably one of the biggest challenges was we've probably grown, I think, by about 40% since COVID started. So 40% of our staff have never seen one of our offices. They all had to be onboarded remotely. We had to make sure that we had a way of doing that really effectively, really quickly. So there were a lot of adjustments. But within about 6 months, we made an announcement to all of our staff and externally that we would embrace remote working permanently. So we're calling it a Team Anywhere initiative. And that's sort of given us a lot of direction and a lot of confidence to ensure that we are investing in the right places and adapting our work styles and practices to cope with this as a sort of permanent shift. So people talk about not wasting a good crisis, and I think it's given us that opportunity to really pivot permanently to a new way of working.
Excellent. I love that team anywhere concept, Harvey. I think that's fantastic. Natalie, what are you seeing?
To Google to take stock of our approach, and been a part of a Tiger team that's been open sourcing how we do that, but equally, of course, being an employee of Google and seeing how that unfolds while, of course, the world is watching. So in some ways, Google has been operating with a remote distributed workforce for some time now. And we recently just compared our data to 2018, where we showed the results of that time. And actually in 2018, 1 in 4 Googlers were already reporting to a non-co-located manager. And almost half of all of our meetings were already including a remote Googler. So it was interesting to see that paralleling study, because the study actually showed that, there was no difference in work effectiveness or promotion trajectory, etc. But what we have seen is there is a huge difference in the feeling of being connected. So that's something that Google is really working on and solving for. And we're really thinking about that in 3 ways. So it's getting connected. So how are we coordinating meetings and people and times? Being connected. So actually providing powerful communication platforms, tools, working from home budgets, equipment, setting up from home, and then finally feeling connected. So that is very much the human side, or the social side of getting to know each other and building trust and rapport, which we would all have experienced, is much different and oftentimes kind of feels forced in a virtual environment. So these are both human challenges, technology challenges, which, because, they are some of the things that we're thinking about right now, but particularly this idea of being connected is very prominent in what we're seeing and what we're focusing on solving for.
Excellent. And it's certainly, for a lot of organisation, that feeling of connectedness can be quite a challenge. So it's great that, Google are looking at balancing that technical or potentially technical constraints with those human constraints, and being able to overcome some of those things. So that's really fantastic to hear. Thanks, Natalie. Matt, what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting, Natalie, because our business has actually, really leveraged a lot of Google's, particularly Google Workspace's tools to enable that. We're pretty lucky that we were a business that worked remotely quite significantly prior to COVID. With our staff being field workers, we're used to doing that work while not being in the office. So while we did kind of scramble, I think like most businesses did, when the national lockdown occurred here in Australia, it was something that we were able to adapt pretty quickly to. I think what's been really exciting more broadly, and to the question, Korrin, is that I think our business and businesses more broadly are now expected to pivot and adapt really quickly. And as a technologist, that's quite exciting, because, I guess formally we have these great ideas and we see these real great use cases for new technologies and new builds. And now these things are really being considered as a way of moving forward and disrupting other areas, whereas previously there'd be a blue sky initiative that us technologists are really trying to drive. So it is actually a really exciting time, I believe.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Matt. And I think, just to what you mentioned is, a lot of organisations, when we went through these periods, there was that level of uncertainty as to how this was going to be accommodated. So it's really good to hear that you were naturally already able to kind of have that remote working, there to support you. So that's really great. Thanks, Matt. And Chris, what are you singing?
Well, our industry is being very different from everybody else. We had to maintain operational parts of our business at sites, so it was business as usual from an operating perspective. However, I joined the business 2 years ago, and 6 months later, after rewriting the roadmap, COVID hit, and we were just about to embark on a big journey. The thing with COVID, it obviously sped that up, and I know it did for everybody else. We had to implement a lot of changes very quickly. We didn't have a lot of the stuff that most businesses have. We had a really static, fixed, old-fashioned environment. You know, unfortunately, IT within aged care has come a long way in the last 12 months. So it was really challenging for us to react when you don't have the tools. We didn't have portable equipment. We didn't have collaboration. It didn't exist. And that all suddenly had to happen very quickly. It was luckily on my roadmap that this is where we were going, but it was about speeding it up. Google came to the party, fantastic, you know, got us up and running in terms of communication between our residents, because as you know, aged care facilities very quickly got locked down. People couldn't go in and out. So families were distressed, you know, residents were distressed, but to have that collaboration and have those tools given to us so that we could start using them really helped us on the journey. A lot of challenges, and certainly, as I said, I think like everybody, it gave us an opportunity just to push forward, steamroll ahead and say, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and we're going to do it quick.
Yeah. And you know, Chris, I'm really glad to hear that you pushed through, even though you were about to embark on a significant transformation initiative, and then this happened, but you chose to just push through. I think that's really fantastic to hear, because a lot of businesses may kind of err on the side of caution to enter such a significant initiative. So yeah, really well done, and thank you very much for your feedback. So Natalie, question for you. What role does innovation play in successful customer transformation initiatives?
So the first part of that question that I'd focus on is the customer side of things. So firstly, I think we'd all agree, both in our business lives, but also in our personal lives, that customers are very, very different now than they were 2 years ago. And that means a few things. We're expecting, you know, faster responses, better digital access, faster delivery, physical and metaphorical. You know, shout out to Australia Post and Co. You know, connecting in different ways. You know, investors are now looking at these things I just mentioned as a list of, as a measure of actual value, which I think is quite interesting. And you know, what does community and social collaboration look like around a brand or service? So I think in our consumer lives, it's putting a lot of pressure on the enterprise, large enterprise, to rapidly accelerate their digital transformation path. But equally, also I think in Australia, particularly, opening up a lot of spaces for digital natives to create and occupy. And so that's very much on the customer side of your question. With that, you know, where does then innovation play in customer transformation? I think of innovation in two ways, and I see that play out at Google in this way. And, you know, I have a very practical approach to the term innovation. I don't think it's something that happens by accident. It doesn't happen automatically, so to speak. It's definitely two things for me. It's a set of principles, firstly, and secondly, a set of processes. So firstly, in terms of the principles, at Google, particularly when we think about innovation, it's number one, focus on the user. And you'll see that in all of our, you know, PRDs, our documents, the way we design products, etc. It always starts with this. And, you know, practically, you know, that often starts with design thinking and user empathy, which again is not something that automatically happens. It's a process, part of which Google supported Stanford to build this double diamond. You've probably seen it before, you know, starts with the user, your rapid prototyping and testing. So very much focus on the user. Psychological safety is definitely a part of that. So in our organizations, how can we create an individual's feeling of being able to take risk and not, you know, face any backlash for taking those personal risks, or you know, putting your hand up and saying that crazy idea without feeling like you could be putting yourself in a compromising position. So psychological safety. And then secondly, freedom to innovate. So, how do you create that environment to be able to drive that out-the-box thinking, again, challenging the status quo, and exploring areas of interest, not just, outside your everyday role, but actually in your everyday role too, and being rewarded for that, I think is critical. And then the final part of the principles of innovation is very much this idea of 10x thinking. And I think in any time, this is the time that has forced us to think 10x. And that phrase 10x comes from our Google Moonshots factory, which is not just about improving an idea by 10%. It's taking an idea and making it, 10 times different. It's a radical solution for a radical problem with radical technology. And again, in terms of tools and technology, that comes down to, do I have the platforms and the experimentation tools to actually be able to facilitate that those principles of innovation? And then the final part is process, which I mentioned. So I recently just spoke to the partner of Area 120. That's our internal incubation lab inside Google, to gather some of his learnings. And again, he said that innovation doesn't happen automatically. It's a process that has to be nurtured along with the cultural principles, which I just said. So in Google, this can manifest in a number of different ways. It can be 20% projects, it can be secondments, rotations, it can manifest in Google Ventures or Google X, or it can just be enabling employees to understand that design thinking methodology. So that would be my answer to that. So to recap to your question, it's clear that the user is changing. So deep empathy as part of the initial design. And then secondly, taking a very pragmatic approach to innovation, which focuses on principles and then process.
Excellent. Thanks, Natalie. And I think, probably just to add a little bit more to that, is really great to hear, that it's not an accidental thing. It does require, as you mentioned, nurture. It needs, concentration. It needs investment, really, in order for you to see or for you to reap the benefits of that innovation. So really fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for your insights on there. Now, directing this question to Harvey. What are you seeing internationally when it comes to digital innovation? Are you seeing anything different between Australia and New Zealand? And what do you think we can learn from each other?
Yeah, it was interesting actually that Australia had, for a period of time, we had a very easy run on the COVID situation. So we were actually unlocked for about 6 months, from I think about December, January through to June. So we actually had an opportunity where we could experiment with some of the things we needed to think about with regard to office re-entry, as an example. So we were able to do that in Australia, whereas our international offices were not. They were more permanently shut and locked down while they fought through a much more serious COVID situation than we did. So it actually did give us an opportunity to experiment with a few things. And just to pick up on something Natalie said about innovation being something that has to be very deliberate, absolutely concur on that. It won't just happen. So if you build it into your culture with things like hackathons and incubators and sprints for specifically aimed at innovating, that will prepare you for when the unexpected happens, and you'll be able to pivot more quickly because you're used to doing that innovation, and it comes more naturally. So we do a lot of that. We have a quarterly what we call a Shippets competition, which is our innovation day, and our staff have completely free reign on that. So there's no constraints about what they investigate, what they innovate on, what they think about, what their project looks like. And that sort of de-risks it. So, as Natalie was saying, you can take risks, you can think about things that are completely out of the box, and then you get to socialize that with all of your colleagues, and you soon find out what's resonating and what people think has some legs, and then you can make further investments in that particular area. So we had to innovate on that Shippets competition too. That used to be very much a live in-person event where you would present in a room full of people, and built up a lot of enthusiasm and atmosphere and that sort of thing in that way. But of course, it didn't translate very well to the remote world we're operating in. So we quickly pivoted that to everyone recorded their presentations, and then we still did a live playback of the recordings to get that atmosphere going again and get the voting happening and all that sort of thing. But it's been very successful, and it has actually opened up the competition to people that weren't previously able to participate because maybe they just couldn't take that day off because they were supporting customers, or they were in a time zone that didn't allow them to collaborate with someone else on the project and present live together. So it has actually evolved quite nicely, and it's one of those sort of gems that comes out of a forced situation where you realize that maybe we should have been doing it this way all along, but COVID and the situation we were in actually encouraged us to do it differently. I can think of another example like that. We used to do a very big annual planning process where people would fly around the world and meet up in a particular location and spend a really intense few weeks going through an annual planning cycle. And now because we're forced to do that remotely, we've now moved that to more of a quarterly basis. So it gives you the ability to pivot more regularly, to tweak those plans and adjust them. And everyone's got used to being, having to do that over video instead of in person. And that's actually working out quite well so far.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Harvey. And I think, to your point, there's a lot of organisations where they have been forced to change due to, various factors. And a lot of organisations are saying, why haven't we always done it this way? Why have we tried to overcomplicate things when actually this is part of where we are? And like I said, the external factors that we don't have control of have caused us to have to change or pivot very quickly and create those new norms. So really, really good to hear that Atlassian were able to do that. So fantastic. And love also hearing the fact that other people can now take part, which previously they may not have been able to. So that's really, really fantastic to hear. So if we just change our focus slightly and think more around digital maturity and how that may foster innovation. In an unpredictable world, and it's definitely increasingly unpredictable at the moment, organisations need to be able to change and innovate quickly, which we've heard from many of you, our panellists this morning. Now, companies that are more digitally mature are likely to have more of an edge than other companies. And to digitally mature an organisation is, they tend to be more successful at driving that innovation. And that's something that's we've uncovered, which is according to Deloitte. So Matt, this question is directed to you. How did Herron Todd White's cloud readiness enable you to pivot quickly during COVID? And what role did collaboration play in that change for you?
Yeah, thanks, Korrin. So firstly, in terms of cloud readiness, it was vital for us. We were quite fortunate that we had just completed a two-year kind of migration to the cloud, to GCP. And for us, it was not so much just a migration, but almost a re-architecture of our whole underlying platform. So we at Herron Todd White built our own software for our internal staff. And what we've seen over the course of the last few years is that, managing traditional infrastructure was just time consuming and not scalable. It didn't really provide us with the platform we needed to provide really great products for our customers, our end users, so that we could really provide the best service to our customers. So we embarked upon that project. We actually were fortunate where we could complete it a few months before the pandemic hit. And it really did set us up for a really positive kind of experience when we did have to pivot a little. As I said before, we're used to building software that our staff internally use, but we weren't really used to a contactless environment. Our staff use software we develop and walk around a house and capture all kinds of information to complete the job. What struck us was that we weren't going to be able to get into properties in every occasion anymore, and we needed to look at something that we could actually provide occupant with, so they could help us with capturing some of that information. At the time when the pandemic hit, it wasn't actually something that we could do in Australia from a legislative point of view, but we saw that was going to change. we knew that people had to get into properties. The market was still booming. So we quite quickly we spun up an environment, an additional environment in GCP that complemented our current kind of platform. And within 2 weeks, we were able to get a prototype up and running. Without a cloud readiness model, it would have been impossible to do this in traditional infrastructure for us. Really difficult. So, having already moved to Kubernetes, to container environment, it was really easy to then plug in an additional part of the product or additional service that enabled us to do that for our staff. So that was really exciting to kind of see. To the second question, Korrin, I think collaboration, it's always such a critical element when it comes to any kind of IT build, particularly in an environment where we're not working together. As other panelists have kind of mentioned, even though we are an IT team, we're used to kind of working using technology remotely. A lot of our sessions previously, particularly around conceptually starting to work out how a product might look and feel, would often be done in person. They'd be workshopped. Now during that period we were on lockdown, so we had to use tools like Jamboard sessions to try and work out how to actually put together a product kind of virtually. And the team just were incredible in what they were able to achieve, collaborating kind of remotely. What probably impressed me more than anything else, though, was we had spent some time during that cloud migration really getting some strong kind of processes in place. So some great CI/CD processes, some real good governance. And it really impressed me how we were then able to shift that to enable us to kind of speed up the process. We got the whole team involved and everyone kind of knew the structures we had to work within. I think that is really critical when it comes to kind of working remotely, is that you have those processes in place.
Excellent, thanks, Matt, and well done on innovating and kind of embracing what you already had and knowing potentially some of those constraints that you were going to face going forward, but being able to collaborate and kind of overcome, or at least use some of the design thinking principles that Natalie mentioned before to be able to kind of come up with that tool. So Rohan, knowing what we know now, we're still always learning, but knowing what we know now, how do you think the approach to digital transformation will change?
Yeah, so I think to understand what's going to happen in the future with digital adoption, we're really got to understand and establish some of the facts, what's actually occurred over the last year or two since we've been in COVID. So we look at the actual corporate ecosystem that we all are a part of. We've got our customers. The customers are telling us 75% of customers who actually adopted a brand new digital channel will continue to use it in the future because they're now accustomed, they're used to it, and they're actually getting a lot more comfortable. We've got employees who are telling us, I'd like to be working within 2 and 3 days from a remote location, any geography, anywhere. That's substantially changed. And then you look at the businesses themselves, and they've realized now that I think it's not fun to be a digital laggard anymore. We've all had those challenges. And for businesses, I think they've also realized that the pain of not changing is far greater than the pain of change. So keeping a stock of those 3 elements, I think what's going to happen, there's 5 key things I think that will shift fundamentally very, very quickly over the next year or so for a number of organizations. And it starts with, I think, you'll see a lot more cloud deployments, rapid cloud deployments in lots of businesses. Matt talked about it. I couldn't agree more with that strategy. And number 2, I think businesses are going to start giving up siloed applications that we used previously and move to digital ecosystems. These are applications that talk freely, have integration built in, and sort of makes it a lot more easy to make those moves and changes. Number 3, employee experience is actually going to rise up to the top in one of the key priorities for businesses in the future. We're also going to see executives shun digital lipstick, where people have come in and said, we've got a digital strategy, it's working. There's going to be real meat behind that. And executives and senior management, employees, customers, they're very, very quickly going to be able to see through it. So that digital roadmap is going to become really critical. And lastly, to drive all of those changes, along with CIOs and CTOs who've traditionally been responsible, I think we're going to see a real culture shift in getting more chief digital officers being appointed, even in small to medium businesses where they feel digital is important as a roadmap to play and provide a more seamless experience for customers and employees alike.
Excellent. Thank you, Rohan. And I can see Natalie nodding and agreeing with your points there. So that's great to see. And Natalie, do you think that there's any new specific areas that organizations should focus on? I know you're already agreeing with Rohan, but is there anything else that you believe we should have that focus on?
Yeah, look, before I jump into my answer, I completely agree. I think I am already seeing and being asked to advise many more cloud digital leaders than I had, transformation leaders than I had previously in the past 12 months. Typically, it was very much focused on the technology decision makers. But I think what we've found, or what I've found, is there is certainly space for those profiles now, because a lot of the technology leaders that I've been working with very much have focused on internal technology tools and infrastructure. And there is this, as I said in my first answer, this huge shift in the way our consumers and our customers are behaving. And there has to be that person that has that constant outward in objective, whilst making sure that we have the infrastructures to support the business. So completely agree. I think that was a great point, Rohan. In terms of your question, which is, are there any other areas, new areas specific that organizations should focus on? So our Google view is that organizations should think about transformation from the lens of these 6 tenets. Now, of course, there may be others and things change, of course, but this is our current view. The first is talent. And, this is about our attention to the whole employee life cycle. So particularly at Google now, we are really focusing not only, of course, on the onboarding, but very much so on the offboarding, I guess, as well, right? Why do people leave? So I think that's critical for us now more than ever in this world of the Great Resignation, to understand why people leave and why people stay. Strategy is number 2. So making sure we have very clear and transparent goals that excite people, that they feel deeply connected to the problem that they're solving. Strategy also too, in terms of the technology, like having a very clear and known technology strategy, because we know that, cloud, once you break apart all the different services, it's a vehicle to achieve business goals. So that has to be a part of organizational transformation. Structure is the third one. So how are we thinking about organizing our teams very differently? I think the shift to agile and that agile way of working, I think, has only accelerated. Empowerment is the fourth rather. So how do we treat employees like owners? And I think, Matt, you made a really great point about CI/CD, and you're probably thinking, why am I saying CI/CD empowerment? But I also think about CI/CD as a technologist in learning. So how do we integrate a continuous integration, continuous delivery of a learning program to empower our employees to grow and with the company? 5th, innovation, which we've talked about. So how do we fuel curiosity? And I also think about this whole platform perspective. So of course, with cloud, the cost to fail is so much lower now. You're not going out and having to buy big servers or invest in huge machines and whatsoever expensive software. So having the environment and the playground to fail, I think, is so important as part of innovation. And of course, not always fail, grow at the same time and innovate. And then the sixth, which I think Google has had a very significant perspective on, is environment. So, how that is, the physical office of the future. And this is particularly interesting for Google too, because our offices were and still are a big part of creating the culture that we have. So I won't spoil now because I have this for another question I know you're going to ask me soon, but I think, we've got some really key thoughts about what the future of a physical office space will look like based on the data that we have from Google. So that's the way we think about it in terms of those key tenets. So talent, strategy, structure, empowerment, innovation, and environment.
Excellent, thank you, Natalie. And I'm always interested in the data that Google, that you are gathering and able to, either put that data into transformation initiatives or, those productivity gains. So, as you know, you and I have worked together before, and always data is at the forefront of everything that a lot of organisations do. I'm just going to take a pause before I go into the next section and just let the audience know that I can see a whole heap of questions coming through. Fantastic. Keep them coming on. At the end of this session, I'll make sure that there is time for us to address those questions. And in the event that we might run out of time, don't worry, we'll make sure that we follow up with you individually. So thank you for sending those through, and I will raise some of those. So just, changing our focus for a moment here, if we think the link between collaboration, productivity, and innovation, these words have been thrown around for quite some time now, but it's actually not until recently that they're a core part of transformation and culture programs. But they seem to be used separately, not together. And studies have shown that, innovation, collaboration, they're not mutually exclusive, and they actually feed and they can build upon each other. And the best organisations, they're not only harnessing the innovation from employees, but also from external factors or outsiders. So Chris, this is a question directed to you. Can you give an example of how Southern Cross Care has enhanced productivity through innovation, and what was the role that collaboration played through that?
Yes, I could probably answer that for the rest of the day, to be honest with you. We've literally gone from 10-year-old systems into the new world, and to start to have tools where you can innovate and collaborate are just mind-blowing for us. So I'm very excited, so forgive me for that. But so we had to deal at the beginning of COVID, we had to deal with changes on a weekly basis at sites. We had government legislation around reporting. It started with flu vaccinations, and they became mandatory within our environment. Currently, obviously, we're dealing with the COVID vaccination as well. And in between those two, we had to be adaptive very quickly to things like staff moving who came in from interstate at that time. They weren't allowed into our facilities. This all had to be tracked, because one of the challenges for us was filling, and we employed 2,700 people, but more than half of those are casual and part-time. So when we have shifts at sites, it's around how do we fill those shifts? And you need to understand your resource pool. Have they traveled interstate? Are they home quarantining? All this sort of stuff. Have they had the flu vaccination? Now, have they had the COVID vaccination? And all of that information has to come together. And how do you fill shifts? So some of the innovative things that we discovered very early on in our Google journey was we discovered one of the products built into the platform called Google Forms. Now, it's not something we actually ever set out to innovate with, ever set out to really sort of push in the business, but it got discovered and got used very quickly. And if you look at innovation, and you've got people in your business who want to innovate, and they get hold of these tools and they start to look at them and understand some of the capabilities. And yes, we drove part of that from our head office around how could we use these. And a really good example here of a collaboration tool used effectively was to take something as simple as Google Forms to replace an old process where we were trying to find what staff were available for these shifts. So traditionally, we would send out an email to 300 people who are in the region that we needed to fill a shift, and somebody would have to deal with those email responses. Now you can imagine that's time consuming, but that was how it was done. We don't have big HR systems that could do it. We just had to do it the old-fashioned way. So Google Forms was there, and suddenly, out the box, we didn't really need to train anybody, because people are clever and they look at these innovative products and they say, well, how can I use Google Forms? Very quickly put a form together, send it out to everybody, and suddenly all the results are in a spreadsheet. You slice and dice it and you can find out. So for us, being able to collaborate with the staff very quickly, because for them it's a benefit, because they can fill a shift, so they feel part of our organization, and they want to work at this site over this weekend. They're now involved with us directly about how do they do that. We're also more efficient in terms of how we fill those shifts, because traditionally, after spending 3 hours going through emails trying to find somebody, if we gave up, we would just put shift out to an agency and pay agency rates to fill it. So we've saved costs through innovation. We've engaged better with our staff, and these are just tools that have come out of the box. So we haven't had to invest anything really to deliver these results. And then, of course, from there, people see the value in a tool like that, and how can they keep innovating using a very simple tool, and what can they do next with it? And I think there's tools like that have really added some amazing value to our business.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. And, I couldn't agree more. For someone who also uses Google Workspace, Forms is probably the most overlooked tool, and it's actually quite powerful, especially because, a lot of those responses can go straight into the back end being a Google Sheet, and then you can run analytics and a whole heap of tools across them. So I absolutely agree with you on that one. And yeah, it's really great to see that people have proactively picked that up. So really, really pleasing to hear that. Harvey, as a global organisation, what are some key lessons learned from COVID, and your hybrid working at Atlassian?
I think actually I see there's a Q&A question on a similar topic.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to, so if I just think for myself, I start work sometimes at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning with the overlap with my US colleagues, and I can be at my desk on video calls until midday or longer, with barely a chance to go and fill up my water bottle sometimes. And by the time you get to that sort of middle of the day, you're pretty tired and pretty drained. There's been a lot of talk about video fatigue. I think that's like one of the key learnings for us is anything you can do to make that video experience better when you're in it, but B, avoid the need for so much real-time collaboration on video. So the concept of asynchronous communications has really risen to the surface. I know Google's been doing it for a long time with Sheets and Docs and that sort of thing, but there's been a number of innovations in that space. A lot of new products emerging. The being able to use existing products in new ways, like that example I gave earlier, where we upload all our shipper videos to YouTube. And we're finding that people are making quick recordings. So if they want to convey an idea to someone, they'll just make a quick recording on their desktop and share that via a chat tool or through a conference page. So I think that's been a big one. Thinking about ways of doing that asynchronous communication, and people have embraced that in a huge way. And we're seeing that come to a lot of the products we use, and we've embraced some new products to make that happen too. So that was probably one of the areas where I've seen the most advancement in terms of a change practice and a learning.
Excellent. Thank you, Harvey. And Natalie, Australia and New Zealand are entering into a post-lockdown world. What's your views on the future of collaboration and digital transformation in what we probably are going to call the new normal?
Yes, so good question. I think, firstly, it's abundantly clear that work is no longer a place, it's a set of values. So work is no longer a place, it's a set of values. And that is both exciting because I think we get to be real people again for the very first time. And work is starting to fit around life versus life fitting around work. And with that comes excitement, but of course, equally a big responsibility. And I think a lot of that will hinge on companies' ability to be able to have the right technology to facilitate that, to keep people engaged and productive and connecting through communication, of course, and collaboration tools. But, it comes down to the facts is, what difference does it make then between if I'm sitting on this Zoom meeting or this Hangouts meeting or whatever it might be with this company versus the next day getting up and sitting on a Hangouts meeting with this particular company? What is the difference? And the difference comes down to values and culture. And that's why I think it's so important to enable that. And as we've talked about, cultural change is going to be an important part of the new work environment because, of course, we've talked about that, but equally the physical environment. So Google has done some interesting work on what the return to office will look like. And our data has shown that an overwhelming number of Google employees see it as a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home. And with that, that's forced us to think about what the physical environment will look like as well. So we are experimenting with things like movable furniture. So, things are now on wheels and, that's no longer cubicles or physical desks. When you are in the office, you're there for a purpose. So what does purpose-driven spaces look like? And oftentimes that's brainstorming. So again, a lot of spaces that move. On top of that, I think it's, the ability to work outside, which I think we've all found a lot of enjoyment of not just sitting at a desk, but can I take my laptop in the garden? Can I take it to the beach or whatever it might be? You can't necessarily bring a beach to an office unless you have the privilege of working at a beach. But, how can we are testing putting, outdoor spaces, like tent-like spaces that, more seating outside. We've introduced a policy where, Googlers can work a few days a year from other offices or from anywhere in the world. So I think there's definitely an environmental part of this. But I think the final thing that I would say about this, and it's a slightly different angle to your question, is I know what we can't do. And what we can't do is we can't recreate what was in a new world, because that's not innovation. And trying to do the way we used to do things, but online, is not going to work either. And Harvey had some great examples from Atlassian of this on how he changed the hack days. We have to say, okay, let's work backwards. Let's pretend we're starting from scratch. What would that look like? And we don't feel limited by what things were, nor do we feel the pressure to recreate how we did things in the past. So I think that would be my final thoughts is, this is an opportunity to bring things from the past that worked, but equally, leave things behind. And the time is now, and this shift, this new way of working will undoubtedly bring even more challenges. Of course, people are looking towards Google, but of course we are figuring things out just as everybody else is. But how each company responds to this change and sees this as an opportunity, I believe, will ultimately define the relevance in the future. So really critical topic.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Natalie. And I think, to the point that you just made, if organizations continue to do the same thing, but expect a different result, it's not going to end up successful, right? You've got to kind of take that step back and go, okay, we have a new norm, but what does that really look like for us? Parts of those that you've done before, yes, probably can work, but actually other parts you probably need to kind of take a step back and go, what does it really mean for us in success? But yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, we see that even in technology. I mean, of course, I've talked about cultural elements here, but even when I'm part of large cloud deployments, we talk about businesses. Are you either trying to be tactical, strategic, or transformation? And a lot of the time, businesses put their hands up and say, we want to be transformational. But you look at the cloud strategy and it's tactical. It's like, let's move this VM on-prem to the cloud. Let's rehost or refactor. But I think it's important to check our assumptions too, in saying that, are we thinking that we're going to be transformational and expecting transformational outcomes, but having very tactical approaches. So I think it also comes not only with the future of work, but equally our technology strategy as well.
Yeah, excellent. And that's, Natalie, that's a great segue into kind of our final theme, which is really about managing that culture shift. So we know that a lot of organizations say they want to be innovative, they want to be collaborative, but once again, organizations don't change overnight. It does actually take time, but transforming leadership, culture, talent, governance and technology takes time and, of course, investment. So, Rohan, why do you think it's important to disrupt the old habits or the culture to create the new change that you want to embark on?
Yeah, and I think the answer is because in each of our fields, we're in a constant state of evolution. I've never heard a customer come and tell us that you're doing it really well and you don't need to do any more than what you're already doing. So we're in a constant state of change. That's what we've got to realize. And I think at Probe, we know that way too well. And Korrin, you've been helping us through this journey. We went on to Google Workplaces. We've had 4 acquisitions over the last 4 years. And in that, if we take the example of the last one, we ran 162 different projects. And collaborative tools like Google Workplace were in our top 3 of those 160, because I think fundamentally we realize the power of these tools to set up a base. It's sustainable, it's cadence, it's all the stuff that Natalie's been talking about, because it's not the flick of a switch, it's a process. It's built over time. And then what I think has been extremely powerful for us on the back of that is to measure these tools and the performance and what it's done for our staff. So some astounding results that we've run. So out of one of the first surveys when we deployed Google Workplaces into the environment, we saw 97% of our people said that they saw a positive impact because of the change. That's a huge number. We talked about productivity and collaboration, and we saw improvements by 53% and 63% respectively from our staff. And finally, our staff actually said that they thought by deploying that technology, we were 80% more innovative. And those are huge numbers. So we're talking about the Great Resignation, all this stuff. These are small steps that actually go a long way. And I think the fundamental philosophy around legacy or practices is, what does success look like? And success has been about bringing the right people with the right communication and the right content all together. And I think that's the story about these collaborative tools and work practices that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, and those are some fantastic numbers as well, Rohan, so well done. Chris, a question for you. And this is actually from our Q&A, and I just thought it fit quite nicely in here. What's been your most valuable learning curve over the past year, and what do you think your biggest challenge is going forward?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, because when I started on our roadmap 12 months ago, just over now, I thought technology would be my biggest challenge. And my learning would be about how do we just get the technology stack in place. But I quickly have learned that it is this disrupting habits. It's this user transformation piece, which never underestimate. And I did, honestly, I did underestimate it. I thought, they'll just come on the journey, it'll be fine. But, a really good example is, and we went the full hog, we went Chrome devices, Workspace, we did everything. But not just that, we're humans, and humans like to be in their comfort zone, and our comfort zone is about doing what we're comfortable with. So, traditionally we've all grown up with systems where you save your own files, you hold them close to you, you look after them and nurture them, and dare anybody else touch them because they're yours. And you give somebody a new platform. Now, traditionally, a new platform, if they could carry on doing what they used to do, they'll do it, because that's what their mind is set at doing. They drive to work the same way every day because that's what they know and that's what they're comfortable with doing. So getting users now to say, I can't do this anymore and I can't do that anymore. Well, but why are you trying to replicate it? What are you trying to achieve? And it's about taking people on that journey of stop looking at replicating what you've been doing and look at what are your outcomes that you want to achieve. Because without that, people will just try as hard as they can to carry on doing it the old way. And, you know, we've grown up, all of us have grown up with conventional tools, and we found ways, incredible ways of using spreadsheets and documents to do goodness knows what. But is it the right tool? Is it the right platform? So we then started to really focus on, and I actually used a team to go around and look at all the use cases of how do the business use documents and templates and you name it, and not look at just copying it over into a new platform, but look at the whole process and then look at about taking people on the journey of, well, yeah, that is the way you used to do it, but you're not going to do it like that anymore, because this is the value you're going to get out of doing it. And I think it's those light bulb moments as well for people, that once they start to do something in a way that is different, and then they realize, actually, this is better than I used to do it because it's quicker, or I get this out of it that I never used to get before. I have my favorite expression is, for every one thing you lose, you gain 10 more. And I think it's that journey that people are on, is about taking them on that journey. Say, yeah, you have lost that. Sorry, that doesn't work anymore, or that's not there anymore. But we're on this transformation piece. But you've got 10 things you can do that you couldn't do before. And it's getting that value back into people, showing them the value. So you get those light bulbs on the moment, and then they come on that journey with you to say, wow, actually, this change is a lot more exciting than I thought. And I think, to the second part of your question, really around future challenges, legacy systems. We've all businesses like mine operate legacy systems. You know, it's one thing moving into Workspace, your productivity suite. That's one thing, but to move out of legacy systems, and that's my goal now in the coming years, will be to decommission legacy systems, move them fully into the cloud, and there'll be multiple systems that will need to replace them. But then leverage some of the capability we've built at the moment with Google Cloud and Data Studio and BigQuery. It'll be about, how do we transform our traditional legacy systems into the cloud? And those are big projects for us, because our core business operates on those, and I'm sure many people's businesses do as well.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that, Chris. And I couldn't agree more. You know, at the heart of change management, it's always what's in it for me. So we've always got to be putting our employees, our team members, our staff first. So what's in it for me into that change? And I really like how you've embraced people who, you know, may have a bit of a resistance to it, but you're working with them to determine, you know, it might not work this way, but this way is actually going to be better, and here are your benefits that you're going to get. And that really resonates, that what's in it for me statement. So yeah, really, really great to hear that that's been incorporated into your change management strategy. We've got a question here, and apparently highly voted question, Natalie. When's the right time to start a design thinking workshop when you're pursuing a business transformation project?
Good question. I would say ASAP, pretty much. So there's two ways you think about design thinking. There, in a digital transformation, there is one that's more strategy and process driven. So what are we trying to achieve for the entire project? So that's less design thinking, and that's more about, what is the vision, what is the mission, who are the stakeholders, what are the key principles, how do we want to measure this change? So there's that kind of design thinking that starts at a programmatic, strategic level. But then there is the design thinking element, which happens more at a use case level. So I would say, kind of get the strategic sprints going, and get the key leaders into the room, and that middle line of manager, I think, is so critical. People often forget about those folks, but those folks are the ones that I think, yeah, they often get forgotten, but they are the ones who will be implementing the change. So bring them along to that broader design thinking session as early and quick as possible, and make sure that there's a mix of, business, operations, finance, procurement, HR, like get as much diversity in that room as possible. And then the second, design thinking, that is very much focused around use cases. So once you've figured out the big how might we question, then I find it's best to sit in the room and then have those brainstorm 10x sessions, breaking down that how might we question that we've agreed on as a leadership team into smaller components that we can break apart, that we can bring different business units along, because those ideas will need to be cracked open by different parts of the business. So the short answer is as early as possible. And also know, my final thought here is that this idea of innovation and this idea of design thinking doesn't belong to any one person. It's a team effort. The team has to be brought along on the idea of thinking this way, which is starting with the user. And that's and this idea of prototyping, or we say predotyping, which is even before that, which often means, quick and dirty tests and sticky tape and cardboard and things like that. And Harvey talked about it, similar things in Atlassian. So that would be my suggestion. Start big, strategic, go into the smaller sprints, but bring the teams on the journey, and don't wait to start. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's where the magic happens. If you wait for perfection, you'll be waiting forever. So start now.
I love that. Thank you so much, Natalie. Look, final question, Matt. What do you think some successful, critical success factors are when you're going into or embarking on a digital change like you've just been through?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit, Korrin, to what Chris and Rohan both talked about before. It's about really engaging people on that journey as well, because the technology side of things, we love building, products that look aesthetically pleasing, that we can showcase and say, hey, look at all this UX principles we use and look how pretty it is. But I think it's really understanding the human side of it and what they actually stand to gain from the product. Having your lab groups early in the process, or we call them lab groups or pilot groups, and getting that feedback straight away as you're going through that digital change. For us, that's been incredible. I think change management, as everyone else has kind of touched on, is so important. And it's really important to also recognize that people don't learn the same way. They don't learn how things, pick up software, pick up toolings identically to each other. So it's working out, when is it right to have train the trainers where peers are training other staff? When is it right to kind of have that classroom environment, short videos, really understanding those user bases, and that every individual wants a different experience in that regard has been a big focus for us, just as important as the technology piece.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more as well, Matt. Understanding how people learn differently, but not only that, understanding maybe some either technology or environmental constraints that they may have that might inhibit some of that learning as well, especially because we're going through these unknown factors that we can't control. So really, just understanding all of those different components is fantastic.
100%. People can't connect like they used to. And that's the key thing. And even our support desk has noticed that. I think our number of tickets for our support system tripled when COVID hit, just purely because people can't turn around and tap someone on the shoulder. So it's really interesting.
And I think being on the front foot of that is really critical. And I've seen a lot of that in the businesses I've supported and at Google. I loved your quote that you loved, Chris. I'm going to take that and put it in my little pocket. And mine is strong opinions loosely held. And I think that's so critical in this point, because we all have a perspective of what some good looks like and how someone needs to be supported. And I think we've seen that particularly, a lot of women are the major caregivers during this time. And that has been a group where we can assume that we need certain things, or different folks need different access to different technologies or learn differently. But I think something I've seen is these quick, sharp pulse surveys. Chris, you made a really good point about forms. That's something that we're doing at Google, to be on the front foot, to every few weeks, it's these quick, sharp forms to the business, to the whole organization, saying, what do you think about this? Give us some feedback here. If we did this, how would that react? We have a hypothesis. How does that sit with you? So I think getting on the front foot of that those strong opinions loosely held, I think is really critical, and of course facilitated really simply through something like forms.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Look, I'm going to wrap up now. A massive thank you all so much to our panelists for joining us today. It was lovely to see you all, but it was also really great to hear your thoughts and your insights. So I really, really appreciate your time. And thank you all for joining the discussion and putting in some of the Q&As. I know we didn't get to answer all of them, but as I mentioned before, we absolutely will follow up with you. Look, next we're heading into the breakout rooms. So in a moment, we'll ask you to navigate to those. We've got 3 breakout rooms following this session. So in room 1 is around creating innovation using data. So you can join Leah Kaplan from Google Cloud talking around breaking down the innovation barrier between IT and the business. Room 2 is around security. Of course, top of mind for most people is, does your security strategy support innovation in a hybrid working world? And you can join Kate Healy from Google Cloud. And then finally in room 3, it's all around managing the shift, the culture shift to innovation. And you can join Lucy Palmer from Fronde, who's my friend and my colleague. And in there, we're going to be talking around collaboration and how collaboration and innovation require successful or a change in individuals' thinking. And I know a lot of us have covered that this morning in the panel, but probably a little bit of a deeper dive. Finally, just when you enter the room, so if you select room 1, 2, or 3, just make sure that you ask to share your audio and your video, and the moderator will bring you into the screen. If you do have any problems, head on over to the ELN help desk area. It's in the expo. And once again, don't forget, we also have an expo area that's running. Each of those booths has a great complimentary offer for you to take advantage of. So absolutely, if you can get time, shoot on over to those booths. Once again, thank you so much, Rohan, Harvey, Matt, Natalie, and Chris. Really, really great to have you and appreciate your time today. Thanks, everyone.